Sometimes the person who answers the wrong call is the one heaven meant to send. The digital clock beside Ethan Walker's bed glowed 2:07 a.m. in soft blue numbers when his phone shattered the silence of the small house. Outside, late autumn rain tapped against the kitchen window. The old furnace hummed somewhere beneath the floorboards, fighting the chill rolling through Pine Creek, Montana. Ethan opened his eyes immediately. Fathers like him rarely slept deeply. Not after years of midnight fevers, bad dreams, and promises whispered beside hospital beds. He reached for the phone before it could ring a second time. Hello. At first there was only breathing. Shaky. Uneven. Then a woman's voice came through, quiet enough to sound like it might disappear. Please, don't leave me alone. Ethan sat up. The room was dark except for the hallway nightlight glowing beneath Lily's door across the hall. Ma'am, are you okay? Silence. Rain. A faint sound in the distance like glass chimes moving in the wind. Then the voice returned. Softer now. I thought I could do this tonight. Ethan stood. Where are you? Another pause. He almost thought the call had dropped. Then an address appeared between trembling breaths. West Ridge Estate. House 17. The line went dead. Ethan stared at the phone. Wrong number. Had to be. Nobody from West Ridge called men like him. West Ridge sat on the hill above town where CEOs, investors, and people with gates taller than pickup trucks lived. He should have gone back to bed. He knew that. The coffee maker still needed fixing. Lily had school in 5 hours. His truck made a sound every time it turned left. Life already asked enough from him. But something about that voice stayed. Not fear. Not panic. Loneliness. The kind that echoed. Ethan moved quietly through the house. He pulled on jeans, boots, and his weathered brown jacket hanging beside the door. Before leaving, he opened Lily's room a few inches. His 8-year-old daughter slept curled beneath a faded quilt, one arm wrapped around a stuffed rabbit missing an ear. Moonlight touched her blonde hair. Ethan smiled softly. Be back soon. Peanut, he whispered. The road to West Ridge climbed through pine trees silvered by rain. His old Ford pickup rattled over wet pavement while country radio murmured low through static. 15 minutes later the iron gates appeared. House 17 stood alone at the end of the drive, lights glowing in 2 mini windows for that hour. The place looked less like a home and more like something built for people who never wanted silence to catch them. Ethan walked to the front door. Rain darkened his shoulders. He hesitated once, then knocked. Footsteps came slowly from inside. The door opened. A woman stood there barefoot in a gray sweater, chestnut hair loose around tired eyes. She looked at him as if he had stepped out of another life entirely. You're not Daniel, she whispered. Ethan shook his head gently. No, ma'am. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the door. Then why did you come? Ethan looked at the rain behind him, then back at the woman whose eyes carried more sorrow than sleep. His voice stayed quiet. Because you sounded like someone who shouldn't be alone tonight. And for the first time since the call, Claire Bennett forgot to close the door. Claire Bennett stood motionless beneath the warm light spilling from the entry hall while rain whispered against the tall windows behind Ethan Walker. For a few seconds neither of them moved. The house seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere deeper inside, a grandfather clock ticked softly. Steady. Patient. The kind of sound that felt louder in lonely places. Claire finally stepped back. You should not be here, she said quietly. Ethan nodded once. Probably true. I called someone else. I figured. Her eyes dropped to his worn jacket, still damp from the drive. The fabric looked out of place against marble floors and framed paintings worth more than his truck. Yet somehow he seemed steadier than everything around him. Then why stay? She asked again. Ethan glanced toward the dark room beyond the staircase. Because sometimes people do not need the right person. They just need someone who shows up. Claire looked away immediately as if the words had landed somewhere she had spent years protecting. She walked toward the living room without answering. Ethan remained by the door until she spoke again. You can come in if you want. The room beyond felt elegant but strangely untouched. A piano sat near the fireplace beneath a portrait of an older woman with kind eyes and silver hair. Fresh white lilies rested beneath the frame. Their scent drifted through the air with the faint smell of coffee gone cold. Claire stopped in front of the piano. Tomorrow is her memorial. Ethan understood before she said another word. Your mother? Claire nodded. 3 months ago. Her voice stayed calm, but her hands did not. They trembled slightly as she touched the polished wood. Everyone thinks I handled it well. Ethan stayed quiet. The board said I was strong. Investors said I was composed. Reporters called me resilient. She laughed softly. It was not joy. Funny word, resilient. Rain tapped harder against the glass. Ethan sat carefully on the edge of a chair. My wife died 6 years ago. Claire turned. I am sorry. Me too. He smiled gently. For a long time I thought being strong meant never letting Lily see me cry. Claire listened. Turns out kids already know. He looked toward the fireless hearth. They just wait for us to tell the truth. Silence settled again. Not awkward. Not heavy. Just honest. Claire walked into the kitchen and returned with 2 mugs. Coffee. Ethan accepted one. The warmth spread through his hands. Thank you. She sat across from him. The clock read 2:41 a.m. outside. The storm softened into mist. Do you ever get tired? Claire asked suddenly. Ethan blinked. Of what? Carrying everyone. He thought about Lily. The school lunches. The bills clipped to the refrigerator. The late nights fixing wires in houses that were never his. He smiled. Every day. Claire lowered her eyes. Then why keep going? Ethan looked at the steam rising from his cup. Because somebody is waiting for me to come home. Claire stared at him for a long moment. The mansion around them was enormous. Beautiful. Silent. But for the first time that night, she realized the man sitting across from her owned something she had not felt in years. Not money. Not power. Home. The clock reached 3:18 a.m. before either of them noticed. Rain no longer struck the windows with urgency. It drifted now in soft silver lines across the glass walls, overlooking the pine valley below. The mansion had grown quieter, almost gentle. Claire Bennett stood beside the piano again, fingers resting lightly against the closed lid. Ethan Walker watched the portrait above it. The woman in the frame carried Claire's eyes. Same gray color. Same guarded sadness. Her name was Eleanor. Claire said softly. She played every Sunday morning. Ethan looked toward the piano. You play too? Claire shook her head. I used to. She swallowed. Stopped years ago. Why? A faint smile crossed her face. Because I got busy becoming impressive. Ethan lowered his eyes into his coffee. There was no judgment there. Only understanding. Claire moved toward a small table beside the fireplace. A stack of envelopes sat untouched beneath a crystal paperweight. She picked one up, but did not open it. She wrote me letters. Ethan stayed quiet. Every month. Even after I moved to Seattle. Even after I became CEO. Her voice thinned. I never answered most of them. The room seemed colder after that. Not because of the weather. Because regret always carried its own winter. Ethan finally spoke. You loved her. Claire laughed softly. That is the problem. I thought love had time. The grandfather clock sounded once. 3:30. Ethan glanced toward the front windows. I should probably head back soon. Lily wakes up at 6. Claire looked at him immediately. Something shifted in her expression. Not panic. Not yet. Just hesitation. Can I ask you something? Sure. When your wife died, she stopped. How did you keep breathing after? Ethan leaned back slowly. Outside, mist rolled over the trees like smoke over dark water. I did not. Claire looked up. Not at first. His voice stayed low. For months I only moved because Lily needed breakfast. Needed shoes tied. Needed someone at school concerts. He smiled faintly. Kids are strange that way. How? They do not let grief win. Claire sat again. Her eyes drifted toward the portrait. I have 300 employees. She folded her hands. 2 houses. Private. Flights. Awards. Ethan listened. Tonight this place felt bigger than the world. Silence followed. Long and honest. Then Claire whispered something so quietly he almost missed it. I was afraid to sleep. Ethan looked at her. Every room reminded me she was gone. Her fingers tightened around the unopened letter. So I called Daniel. Ethan guessed assistant. Maybe friend. Maybe someone paid to answer pain. He did not answer, she said. Then I dialed again. She looked at him now. Wrong number. Ethan smiled gently. Happens. Claire shook her head. No. Her eyes glistened beneath the warm light. You do not understand. She looked around the enormous room. Nobody comes when they are not supposed to anymore. Ethan had no answer for that. The house settled softly around them. Wood creaked. Rain faded. Somewhere upstairs a vent clicked on. Ordinary sounds. Human sounds. For the first time in months Claire Bennett did not feel like the only heartbeat inside her own home. The sky had begun to pale when Ethan Walker finally stood from the chair. Dawn was still hiding behind the mountains, but the darkness had softened into that quiet blue hour when the world felt suspended between yesterday and tomorrow. Claire Bennett remained beside the fireplace, holding her mother's letter unopened in both hands. "You really have to go?" she asked. Ethan smiled apologetically. "Lily has spelling practice today. If I miss breakfast, I will hear about it for a week." A small laugh escaped her before she could stop it. It sounded unfamiliar in the room, almost fragile. Ethan reached for his jacket hanging over the chair. The fabric had dried near the warmth of the kitchen lights. Claire watched him move. Nothing about him looked extraordinary. Faded denim, scuffed boots, hands marked by years of honest work. Yet somehow he had changed the air inside a house that money never managed to warm. "Wait," she said suddenly. Ethan paused. Claire disappeared into the kitchen and returned carrying a white paper bag. "Blueberry muffins," she explained quietly. "The chef drops them off every Friday. I never eat them." Ethan accepted the bag carefully. "Lily will think I became a hero." Claire lowered her eyes with a faint smile. "Maybe you already were." The words hung there longer than either expected. Ethan looked away first. Outside, mist drifted across the long driveway. Morning birds had started somewhere beyond the pine trees. He moved toward the front door, but Claire spoke again. "Can I ask one more thing?" He turned. "How old is she?" 8. His face softened immediately. "Thinks pancakes solve emotional problems." Claire smiled. "Do they?" Ethan shrugged. "Depends how much syrup is involved." This time the laugh came easier. Real. Warmer. Claire walked with him to the entrance hall. Sunlight had not reached the windows yet, but the house no longer felt as heavy. Ethan noticed a framed photo near the staircase. Claire as a teenager beside the woman from the portrait. Both smiling. Both barefoot in front of the same piano. "You played together," he said quietly. Claire followed his gaze. "Every Sunday." Then maybe she never really stopped listening. Claire looked at him. Her eyes shimmered, but she did not look away. For a second she seemed younger. Not a chief executive. Not the woman whose face appeared in magazines. Just a daughter missing her mother. Ethan opened the front door. Cold morning air drifted inside, carrying pine and rain. He stepped onto the porch. "Thank you for coming," Claire said behind him. Ethan turned. "You called?" She shook her head slowly. "No," her voice dropped almost to a whisper. "I dialed by accident." Ethan stood still. Claire looked at the empty driveway, then back at him. "You came anyway." The silence between them felt different now. Softer. Deeper. Somewhere inside the mansion the grandfather clock chimed 4 times. Ethan gave a small nod. "Take care of yourself, Claire." He walked toward the truck. Claire remained at the doorway watching. The engine started with its familiar rough sound. Ethan lifted one hand before pulling away down the hill. Claire stayed there long after the taillights disappeared into the mist. In her hand, she still held the unopened letter. But for the first time since her mother died, she was not afraid to open it. By 7:15, that morning Ethan Walker was back in his kitchen flipping pancakes while Lily sat at the table wearing a yellow sweater and brushing syrup onto one pancake with the concentration of a scientist. Sunlight spilled through the window above the sink. The storm had passed. Pine trees outside still carried beads of rain that caught the morning light like tiny stars. "Daddy," Lily said seriously, "did you save somebody last night?" Ethan almost dropped the spatula. "Why would you ask that?" She pointed toward the white paper bag on the counter. "You only bring surprise muffins home after emotional events." Ethan laughed despite himself. "That specific, huh?" Lily nodded proudly. "I know things." Across town, the world looked very different. Glass walls reflected the Montana sky from the top floor of Bennett Medical Technologies. Assistants moved quickly. Phones rang. Screens glowed with charts, schedules, and market reports. Claire Bennett sat at the head of the conference table wearing a navy suit that made her look every bit the celebrated chief executive everyone expected. But the unopened letter rested inside her leather folder beneath financial projections and merger documents. "Claire," Daniel Mercer's voice pulled her back. Her chief of staff stood beside the presentation screen. "Are you with us?" Claire blinked. "Sorry." Several executives exchanged quick glances. The meeting continued. Revenue forecasts. Expansion plans. Investor concerns. Words filled the room, but none stayed. Claire kept seeing an old pickup disappearing through morning mist. Kept hearing one sentence. "Somebody is waiting for me to come home." During the break, Daniel approached quietly. You left your phone off all night. Claire looked up. I know. I was worried. She hesitated. I called someone. Daniel frowned slightly. At 2 in the morning? Claire almost smiled. Wrong number. He waited. And her fingers rested over the folder containing her mother's letter. He came anyway. Daniel said nothing after that. Back at Pine Hollow Elementary, Ethan stood outside Lily's classroom fixing a loose strap on her backpack. Children rushed past carrying lunchboxes and art projects. The air smelled like wet leaves and pencil. Shavings drifting from the open hallway. Do not forget, Lily announced. Today is Family Essay Day. Ethan froze. Family Essay Day? She nodded. I wrote about you. He looked nervous immediately. Lily grinned. You only cried a little in my story. Ethan laughed and kissed her forehead. Very generous. She started toward class, then turned back. Daddy? Yeah. Whoever needed help last night, her small face softened. I hope they are okay now. Ethan watched her disappear inside. He did not answer because he did not know. At that same moment, Claire stood alone in her office overlooking downtown Pine Creek. She finally opened the letter from her mother. The paper trembled slightly in her hands. The first line read, My sweet Claire, if you are reading this after I am gone, please remember that success is a beautiful thing, but it is not the same as being loved. Claire closed her eyes. Somewhere between a board meeting and a wrong number, something quiet had already begun to change. 3 days passed before Claire Bennett saw him again, although she did not plan to. Friday afternoon sunlight stretched across Main Street as she drove back from the memorial service that had finally ended after hours of handshakes, condolences, and polished smiles. The black sedan moved slowly through Pine Creek while autumn leaves drifted across the road in gold and amber waves. Her driver had offered to take the wheel, but she needed quiet. Real quiet. Not the kind found in conference rooms with soundproof glass. She stopped at a red light beside Pine Hollow Elementary, just as children poured out of the building carrying backpacks and laughter. Then she saw them. Ethan Walker stood near the sidewalk holding 2 grocery bags in one hand, while Lily bounced beside him wearing a knit hat with tiny white stars. Daddy, that pumpkin is crooked. It has character. It looks confused. Ethan pretended to inspect it seriously. Fair point. Claire smiled before she realized she was doing it. Lily suddenly looked up. Her eyes widened. Daddy. Ethan turned. Time seemed to slow for half a heartbeat. Claire lowered the window. Hello. Ethan looked surprised, but not uncomfortable. Claire. Lily stepped closer. You are the lady from the muffins. Claire blinked. Ethan looked embarrassed immediately. I might have mentioned that. Lily extended a small hand through the open window with complete confidence. I am Lily. I am 8 3/4 now because birthdays count. Claire shook her hand gently. Nice to meet you. Lily studied her face with the terrifying honesty only children possessed. You still look sad. Ethan softly said her name, but Claire stopped him with a small smile. She is right. Lily thought for a second. When Daddy gets sad, we make grilled cheese and watch old cartoons. Ethan laughed quietly. That information was classified. Lily ignored him. You can come sometime if you want. Claire stared at her. The invitation arrived so naturally it felt almost unreal. No titles. No introductions. No questions about wealth or status. Just kindness offered the way children handed out crayons. Ethan shifted the grocery bags. You do not have to answer that. Claire looked at him. What if I want to? He seemed caught off guard. Behind them, cars waited patiently while leaves rolled across the pavement. The town moved around them, ordinary and warm. Lily leaned closer. We also have a cat named Pancake, but he acts like a landlord. Claire laughed. Fully this time. The sound surprised even her. Ethan noticed. His expression softened. The light changed green. A horn sounded gently somewhere behind her. Claire reached for a card from the center console, but paused. It carried her title. Chief Executive Officer. Wealth. Distance. She put it back. Maybe I will just remember the way, she said instead. Lily grinned like someone who had solved a puzzle. As Claire drove away, she looked in the mirror once. Ethan and Lily were still standing there beneath the falling leaves. One carrying groceries. One carrying joy. And for the first time in years, Claire Bennett wondered if the life she had built was missing something impossibly simple. A kitchen table with 3 chairs. Saturday arrived wrapped in clear skies and cold mountain air. Pine Creek smelled of wood smoke and fallen leaves. Ethan Walker stood in his kitchen stirring. Tomato soup, while Lily sat cross-legged on the living room rug, building a cardboard castle for Pancake, who had already rejected ownership of the property and fallen asleep beside the heater. You think she will come? Lily asked without looking up. Ethan almost dropped the spoon. Who? She raised one eyebrow exactly the way her mother used to. Daddy. Ethan sighed. We are not expecting anyone. Lily returned to her castle with the confidence of someone who knew more than adults. At that exact moment, a dark blue SUV slowed outside the small house. Claire Bennett sat inside, holding a paper bag from the bakery downtown. She had driven past twice already. The house looked exactly as she remembered from Ethan's stories. White siding needing paint. Wind chimes hanging crooked by the porch. A bicycle leaning against the steps. Nothing impressive. Everything alive. She almost told the driver to leave. Then the front door opened. Lily stood there holding a wooden spoon like a tiny sheriff. Daddy, she shouted. The muffin lady found us. Ethan appeared behind her and stopped. Claire suddenly felt ridiculous. Billion-dollar negotiations had never made her nervous. This did. She stepped out carrying the bag. I hope this is not strange. Ethan looked at her for a moment before smiling. A little. Claire lowered her eyes. I can leave. I did not say that. Lily had already reached her. Come in. Pancake accepts visitors if they respect his authority. The house smelled like soup, cinnamon, and something baking in the oven. Claire stood quietly taking it all in. Family photos lined one wall. Lily at age for holding a fishing pole twice her size. Ethan covered in flour beside a birthday cake that leaned dramatically to one side. A smaller frame sat near the window. Ethan and a woman with bright eyes laughing into the wind. Claire noticed Ethan glanced toward it. My wife, he said softly. Emily. Claire nodded. She looks kind. She was. Silence settled gently. Lily rescued them both by dragging Claire toward the living room. Sit here. This is the good chair. Pancake only bites emotionally. Claire laughed again. It came easier now. Later they sat around the kitchen table eating grilled cheese cut into uneven triangles. Sunlight poured through the window and painted gold across the worn wood surface. Claire had eaten in restaurants overlooking oceans, at charity galas, inside private lounges above cities. None of them felt like this. Lily dipped her sandwich into soup. Do rich people eat grilled cheese? Ethan nearly choked. Claire answered without hesitation. Not enough. Lily nodded seriously. That seems like a mistake. Ethan smiled into his cup. Claire watched him. The quiet way he listened. The way he checked Lily's bowl without thinking. The way ordinary moments seemed sacred around him. Then her phone vibrated across the table. Daniel Mercer. Followed by 3 missed calls from the board. Claire stared at the screen. The room stayed warm. The soup still steamed. Lily was explaining Pancake's complicated employment history. For the first time in years, Claire did not want to answer. She turned the phone face down. Ethan noticed. Everything okay? Claire looked around the small kitchen with its chipped mugs and sunlight and laughter. I think, she said quietly, I forgot what okay felt like. The sun had already slipped behind the mountains when Claire Bennett finally stood from the kitchen table. Empty soup bowls remained near the sink. Pancake had promoted himself from landlord to supervisor and fallen asleep in Lily's cardboard castle. The little house glowed under soft yellow lamps while evening settled outside in blue shadows. I should go, Claire said quietly. Lily looked genuinely disappointed. Already. Ethan gathered plates from the table. People with important jobs usually have places to be. Claire watched him for a second longer than she meant to. Maybe. Lily climbed onto her chair. You can come back tomorrow. Ethan gave her the look every parent used when children accidentally changed adult lives. Lily ignored it completely. Claire smiled. I might. The answer surprised all 3 of them. Outside, cold air drifted through the porch wind chimes. Ethan walked her to the SUV waiting by the road. Neither spoke immediately. The sky above Pine Creek carried the first stars. Somewhere farther. Down the valley a dog barked once, and then the world returned to quiet. Claire folded her arms against the chill. Your daughter is extraordinary. Ethan smiled. She gets that from her mother. Claire nodded slowly. And from you. He looked away first. I do not know about that. I do. The words came softly. Honest enough that Ethan finally met her eyes again. Claire took a breath. I need to tell you something. He waited. That night. She looked toward the dark road. I was not calling for help. Ethan stayed silent. I was calling Daniel because I did not want to be alone in that house. Her voice lowered. You were never supposed to answer. Wind moved through the pine trees behind them. I know, Ethan said gently. Claire shook her head. No, you do not understand. She turned back to him. Everything after that should not exist. Her eyes glistened under the porch light. The coffee. The memorial. Today. Ethan said nothing. It was all built on a mistake. The silence stretched between them. Not painful. Just real. Ethan rested one hand against the porch railing. Claire. She looked up. Sometimes wrong roads still take people home. The words hit her harder than any speech she had heard at boardrooms or memorial services. She laughed softly through damp eyes. You always talk like that. Only when I am tired. She smiled. Then the smile faded into something more vulnerable. I do not want this to disappear. Ethan looked toward the warm light inside where Lily was now showing Pancake a paper crown. Neither do I. Claire's breath caught slightly. For one quiet moment, neither moved. The distance between them felt smaller than it had any right to. Then her phone rang again. Daniel Mercer. Followed by messages lighting the screen one after another. Emergency board session. Investor concern. Media inquiry. Claire stared at the display. Ethan noticed the tension return to her shoulders. The world was calling her back. The bigger one. The louder one. Claire slipped the phone into her coat without answering. I have to go, she whispered. Ethan nodded. She opened the SUV door, then stopped. If I call again. Her voice became almost impossibly quiet. Will you still answer? Ethan looked at her for a long second. If it is you, he said softly, I probably will. Claire closed the door gently, but as the SUV disappeared into the mountain road, she carried one terrifying realization back into the night. The first call had been an accident. Wanting another one was not. 2 weeks later, the first snow of the season touched Pine Creek. Not enough to cover the roads. Only enough to dust the rooftops and settle like powdered sugar across the pine branches. Ethan Walker stood outside Pine Hollow Elementary waiting for Lily while cold air turned his breath white. His phone vibrated once. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. Almost. Hello. Silence answered first. Then a familiar voice. Softer now. Steadier. Can you come? Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Claire, please. No fear. No panic. Just honesty. Where are you? Bennett Medical Foundation Hall. She paused. Today is the dedication ceremony for my mother. Ethan looked toward the school doors. Children were beginning to spill outside. I have Lily. Bring her. The answer came immediately. Please bring her. An hour later, the old Ford pickup rolled into the parking lot beside black sedans and polished luxury cars that reflected the pale winter sun. People in coats moved toward the glass entrance carrying programs with Eleanor Bennett's name printed in silver letters. Ethan adjusted Lily's scarf. Remember, he said quietly, we are guests. Lily nodded. Important guests? Regular guests. She smiled. Those are my favorite kind. Inside the hall, everything gleamed. White flowers lined the stage. A grand piano stood beneath a portrait of Eleanor smiling exactly as she had in the photo at Claire's house. Executives filled the front rows. Board members whispered. Cameras waited near the back wall. Ethan immediately felt out of place. Work boots. Old jacket. Small town life in a room built for people who shook hands with power. Daddy. Lily tugged his sleeve. Claire stood near the stage. She wore a charcoal dress and simple pearl earrings. No spotlight touched her yet, but Ethan saw it instantly. She looked for him. Not the board. Not the cameras. Him. Their eyes met across the room. Something quiet passed between them. Relief. Maybe more. Claire walked down from the stage, ignoring every surprised glance around her. She stopped in front of Lily first. You came. Lily grinned. I brought emergency courage. Claire laughed softly. Then she looked at Ethan. Thank you. Before he could answer, someone called her name. The ceremony was starting. Claire returned to the stage. The room settled. She stood behind the podium, holding one sheet of paper. Her prepared speech. She looked at it, folded it once, set it aside. Murmurs moved through the audience. Claire lifted her eyes. My mother taught me many things, she began quietly. She taught me success, discipline, excellence. She paused. But I think I missed her greatest lesson. The room grew still. A few weeks ago, I called the wrong person in the middle of the night. Heads turned. He was never supposed to answer. Ethan lowered his eyes. Claire kept speaking. He had every reason not to come. He had a daughter at home. Bills. Responsibilities. An ordinary life. Her voice softened. He came anyway. Silence filled the hall. That night, I learned something my mother tried to tell me for years. Claire looked directly at Ethan now. Love is not measured by titles. Home is not built by money. And the strongest people are often the quiet ones. Then she stepped down from the stage. Hundreds watched. Cameras remained forgotten. Claire stopped in front of Ethan and held out her hand. Please stay. The room fell completely silent. Ethan looked at Lily. She gave a tiny nod as if this had been obvious all along. He took Claire's hand. And somewhere beneath winter light and falling snow, two lives built by loss finally stopped standing alone.